Hi, Sandhya. How are you doing?
All good, Subhadra. Nice to see you. Also, I was just thinking as we were meeting today that we are already at the end of this year. Can you imagine? We're already at the end of
Yes,
December, and a lot has
yeah,
happened in India and the world over. No?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's actually the perfect time to reflect on the year that is ending, especially all which has happened in the Indian judiciary. So
Yeah.
the apex court here has deliberated, issued directions, and also delivered judgments on
Mm.
a range of issues, from its own collegium, same gender marriages, and the right to live or die, the constitutional issues, upholding certain cultural practices, sexual harassment cases, consumer rights, etc., and much more. And these were some of the landmark judgments which were passed this year as well.
Right. Actually, you know what? Thanks to the lottery and our discussions on Tête-à-Tête, I got to read a lot more of legal content, especially the landmark judgments.
Yeah,
Right away, one of the several judgments were passed this year,
correct.
and right away on top of my head, if my memory serves me right, is one of the cases that was passed in January 2023 when
Hmm.
the Supreme Court had issued revised guidelines for advanced medical directives and wills. Basically,
Correct.
for people who were terminally ill in a vegetative state and couldn't, make the decision to want to continue treatment or otherwise. Guidelines were made in 2018, but the guidelines were turned out to be very, what shall I say, time consuming. For instance,
Yeah,
if a terminally ill patient expressed his or her desire not to continue treatment or want to withdraw life support, there was a
yeah,
very elaborate process in place, like a primary medical board had to assess the patient. The secondary medical board had to say yes to it. Then it had to go to the judicial first class magistrate. And by the time, in the whole process, the whole point of that, they were only prolonging the agony of that terminally ill patient. So, taking
correct.
cognizance of that, in January 2023, the Apex Court issued revised guidelines, primarily streamlining the procedure and the timelines so that the purpose of the terminally ill patient not having to suffer further
I think this is
was
very, very important,
in,
Sandhya, extremely important.
true. In fact, if you remember, we did a Tête-à-Tête version on euthanasia. And we
Yes,
had
we did.
discussed
Yeah,
this in detail there. In fact, I think for the benefit of the viewers, I think we will just put up the link there should they want to go back and have a look at that episode.
definitely.
Yeah.
So, Sandhya, adding to what you have said, another interesting judgment which comes to my mind is in this Dr. Jaya Thakur versus Union of India.
Right.
So in March 2023, if you recollect, the Supreme Court had actually given direction and laid down model for providing separate toilets and free sanitary napkins for girls
Right.
from classes 6 to 12 in
Right.
all government schools and government aided residential schools.
Right.
And also it further directed the government to frame certain mechanisms for the safe disposal of the sanitary napkins in schools. This
True.
is very, very thoughtful.
Yeah.
And it is a very welcome judgment from the human rights and environment protection perspective also.
Absolutely. Subhadra, in May 2023, and this was a very surprise judgment, in May 2023, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court
Yeah,
held that the Supreme Court has the power to directly grant divorce under
yeah,
Article 142 of the Indian Constitution. Now, just to give some perspective on this, Article 142 of the Indian Constitution, it empowers the Supreme Court to directly pass orders, any orders, if it meets the end of justice, meets the ends of justice.
yeah. And also, this judgment enables the Supreme Court to waive off this mandatory 6 month separation period,
Ah,
especially if it is of the view that the marriage is completely irrevocably broken, and
hmm.
waiving off will ensure that justice.
Right, right.
And another judgment in May 2023, which the Supreme Court has passed, is the practice of Jallikattu,
Right.
Kambala,
Hmm.
and the Bailgada Shariat, which were previously banned in 2014.
Right.
So this petition itself was filed against the state government's rules, which were framed on practices stating on the cruelty to animals.
Right.
So this year, if you see that the Supreme Court has clearly upheld these practices on the ground that the court did not wish to disrupt the cultural practices. So that is the weightage which the Supreme Court has given for our culture and the practices.
Right.
And further, the Supreme Court also stopped the short of giving fundamental rights to animals. And also the judgment received a kind of a mixed response, especially from the animal rights activists who view this as a great setback for the protection of animals.
Right, right. Subhadra, while disposing of a writ petition filed by the professor of a university who was accused of sexual misconduct with his students and hence terminated, a writ petition was filed by him. The case is Aureliano Fernandez versus State of Goa. Now, while going through this case, the Supreme Court found of several procedural irregularities and lapses in the manner at which the inquiry was conducted under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, or the POSH Act as we all know it. Clearly, the Supreme Court was unhappy and expressed disappointment and displeasure at the way the POSH Act has been implemented almost a decade after it has been enacted. And therefore, in this year, the Supreme Court laid down a set of directions for the effective implementation of the POSH Act. So,
right. And also, I like to bring to your notice that we had covered this on the verdict section as well on the lottery. And it is also something where, if you see, the apex court has also held in another case in the same time where sexual harassers should not be allowed to escape from the law due to any kind of hyper technicalities of the court or any kind of procedural shortcomings of the court.
Yeah, right. We covered it. Correct. Yeah, yeah. True. Actually, both cases are very good examples of gender sensitization at the same time, protection of women at the workplace, especially. Yeah. Also, I'd like to mention another case. This is completely opposite. This is a consumer case. I think it was passed sometime in June this year, where it was a consumer court case, which had actually gone to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court actually held, and permit me to see this, that it set aside a consumer order passed saying that theft of personal belongings of a passenger on a train does not amount to deficiency in service by the railways. It was an Indian Railways case. So it was a very interesting case. Yeah.
Yeah. Another interesting case in September where the Supreme Court passed a ruling to protect the interests of illegitimate children, that is children born out of void or voidable marriages under the Hindu Marriage Act. This case is called as the Ramana Siddhappa versus Mallika Arjun case. Here the court has clearly held that even the children have the right to inherit the property of the parents, which is both self-acquired and the legitimate ancestral property of any of the parent.
Oh, okay. But around the same time, there was another diametrically opposite issue, the much hotly debated same-gender marriages. You remember we had also had a discussion on that? So the Supreme Court, in a 3-2 verdict, it was not a unanimous verdict though, in a 3-2 verdict, rejected a bunch of pleas and petitions received requesting for legalizing same-gender marriages. So the Supreme Court rejected same-gender marriages. However, the Supreme Court actually gave out a direction to the union government to frame suitable policies, making it easier and enabling same-gender couples for adoption, succession, and related issues. Again, this was a judgment that I even remember we both hotly debated it. And at the same time, it received mixed reviews from different sections of the society. Clearly, the LGBTQ community was definitely disappointed, and legal rights activists in support of the LGBTQ community were deeply unhappy. But then this was a verdict which also, I mean, I would think it's partly both ways, because adoption and succession, one has to wait and see what the union government will bring out. So.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Sandhya, another interesting judgment which was passed is the issue of ownership of immovable property. So here, where the Supreme Court has clearly laid down the scope and the validity of a power of attorney, So the court has clearly held that merely having a power of attorney will not be recognized as having any rights on any kind of immovable property. Okay. So this will also kind of impact, the purchase, the sale transactions, as there have been several transactions which have been executed based on a POA alone.
Right.
So right. The court has clearly reiterated that for the sale, the documents are mentioned in the Transfer of Property Act must exist.
Okay. So, Badra, perhaps the most landmark judgment of 2023. 11th December, the Supreme Court has upheld the abrogation of Article 370 of the Constitution, and the views received sharply divided views.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is, absolutely, Sandhya. And it is especially where the Article 370 gave Jammu and Kashmir special status, and the state had its own constitution, a separate state flag, along with the Indian flag, and the autonomy over all matters except defense and foreign affairs.
Right.
And in 2019, the Union government also abrogated and repealed the article. And further, they were also divided into two union territories, which is Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh.
Right.
And an appeal, a 5-judge Supreme Court bench unanimously upheld the abrogation of the Article 370, meaning that Jammu and Kashmir does not have any special status in India.
Basically means that Jammu and Kashmir is on par with all other states of the country.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, by the way, it was a very long and a very, very detailed judgment that was written by the Chief Justice of India himself. To put it in just 2 lines, I will tell you that the Supreme Court held that Article 370 was only a temporary provision, and it was not meant to be permanent in nature. Article 370 was put in place when we got independence, right? Or a little later. But it was not meant to be permanent in nature. Also, the object of the judgment was clearly to integrate the state of Jammu and Kashmir constitutionally and as a state within India. So this, I can tell you, was the crux of the judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Sandhya. So what a way to round off this year, and we have been we have shared quite a few landmark judgments. True. And of course, as usual, we thank the viewers for connecting with us, and we wish everybody a very, very happy and Merry Christmas and a very happy 2024 with a lot of prosperity and happiness.
I will add on, I will also wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandhya.
See you and all our viewers next year. Bye.
Bye.